That is the hull of the HMS Endurance, the sunken ship of legendary polar explorer Ernest Shackleton, discovered all the way down in the icy depths of the Antarctic Ocean.
When it comes back to the UK, because of the power of the picture, there are various versions of it where the image of the James Caird has been cut out.
For over a century, a single photograph from the Antarctic ice was considered a sacred relic of survival. Its legendary blur thought to be the most honest account of the Endurance crew's fate. But when artificial intelligence was unleashed to sharpen this image to perfect clarity, the experts who created it were not met with celebration, but with a chilling, profound regret. Why would they recoil from their own stunning success? What truth did the perfectly clear image reveal that was so unsettling? They now wish it had remained forever lost in the blur. The promise of perfection. We start by looking at a powerful comparison. A picture of the same historical moment shown in two very different ways. On one side is the original, world-famous photograph of the ship known as the Endurance, a vessel that became completely trapped and surrounded by thick ice in the freezing emptiness of Antarctica way back in the year 1915. For over a century, this single image has been the main symbol of a legendary story of human survival against nature. But it has always been a ghost from the past, a very blurry and faded picture where the faces of the men and the details of their ship were lost in a grainy fog. People looked at this photo for generations, trying their best to imagine the true feeling of the cold and the deep worry that the crew must have felt while they stood beside their only home as it was slowly being crushed. On the other side, we see a brand new version of that exact same photo. But this one is incredibly sharp and full of detail, looking so real that it feels like it could have been taken with a modern camera just yesterday. This astonishing result was achieved using a technology called artificial intelligence, or AI, which is a type of smart computer program that can study millions of images to learn how to fix old, damaged ones by guessing what the missing details should look like. But just as people around the world began to celebrate this amazing achievement, the very same team of experts who had created this perfect image did something completely unexpected. They issued public statements filled with words like "a serious mistake" and "profound regret," making it clear that they wished they had never touched the original photograph at all. This action created a confusing and urgent mystery, not just about a simple error, but about a much deeper problem. Why would making history look clearer and more perfect be a terrible mistake? And what danger did the experts see in this beautiful picture that made them so afraid of what they had done? The crime scene, the value of the blur. To truly understand why the experts were so worried, we have to go back and look at the original blurry photograph not as a bad picture, but as a very important piece of evidence, almost like a clue found at the scene of a crime. For many years, real historians, who are people that study the past for a living, have had a very careful and slow way of working with items like this old photograph. When they look at this picture, they do not see the blurriness and the faded parts as mistakes that need to be fixed, but instead, they see these things as important information that tells a part of the real story. The blur itself is a clue because it tells them about the limits of camera technology that existed in 1915, and it also shows them just how incredibly difficult it was for the photographer to do his job in the freezing, windy conditions of Antarctica, where the cold could easily damage the equipment and the film. This blurriness also represents something that is very important to honest historical work, which are the empty spaces or the missing pieces in our knowledge about what happened long ago. Good historians understand and accept that they cannot know everything for certain about the past, so they have a deep respect for these empty spaces, and they do not try to fill in the missing details with pure guesses. Their job is a slow and patient process. Like the work of a detective, they carefully compare the photograph with other evidence, such as the personal diaries written by the crew members, maps of the area, and other different photographs from the same expedition. to slowly build a true and believable story. This careful and honest way of studying history has been trusted for a very long time, which makes what happened next in our story very confusing. Why would these very same experts, who built their entire careers on this slow and careful method, suddenly decide to risk everything on a brand new and unproven computer technology? Tampered evidence. The truth about Frank Hurley. To make this mystery even deeper, we now need to look closely at the man who actually took the famous photograph, a person named Frank Hurley. The important thing to know about Frank Hurley is that he was not just a simple photographer whose only job was to record exactly what he saw. He was also a very famous artist and a showman, a person who was known for wanting to create the most dramatic and exciting pictures possible so that people back home would be amazed by the story of the expedition. To do this, he sometimes used a special method that was very advanced for his time, a method that historians today call composite photography. This term sounds complicated, but the idea behind it is actually quite simple to understand. Composite photography means taking different parts from several different pictures and combining them together to create one brand new. Final picture. Back in 1915, photographs were captured on large, flat pieces of glass called glass plates, which acted like the film in an old camera. What Frank Hurley would sometimes do was take the sky from one glass plate, because it had beautiful clouds, and then take the image of the ship from a completely different glass plate, and then maybe even take the group of men from a third glass plate, and he would skillfully print them all together in a darkroom to make a single photograph. The final result would be a picture that was much more powerful and visually interesting than any single photo he could have taken in one real moment. Because of this special method, serious historians have argued for many years about whether our famous photo of the Endurance is a true, single snapshot of reality, or if it is one of Frank Hurley's artistic creations. This makes the entire situation much more complicated because if the original evidence itself might not be 100% true, then what happens when a perfectly logical computer tries to find the absolute truth inside of it? The thirst for answers, the need to fix history, this deep uncertainty about the famous photograph, where even the original evidence might not be completely real, creates a very uncomfortable feeling for people living in our modern world. In today's society, we are all very used to getting information instantly and perfectly, because we have powerful computers in our pockets called smartphones that show us crystal clear pictures and give us answers to our questions in just a few seconds. Because of this, our brains have become very impatient with things that are old, incomplete, or mysterious. And we often feel that anything that is blurry or broken needs to be repaired or updated to be valuable. This feeling has created a strong and growing pressure in our culture to not just look at history, but to actively try to fix it. For many years, we have seen this idea in action in other areas. For example, companies have used technology to add bright colors to old black and white movies, because they believe that younger audiences will not be interested in watching something unless it looks as sharp and modern as the movies made today. This shows a wider belief that the past is somehow not good enough on its own, and that it needs modern technology to make it more exciting and easier for people to understand. This growing feeling that the past needs to be corrected created a huge amount of pressure on the experts and museums who take care of historical items like the Endurance photograph. They saw how much people loved seeing old things made new again, and it made the decision to use artificial intelligence feel like the next logical and necessary step. So, now that this powerful computer was finally given the task of satisfying this great public thirst for a perfect answer, what exactly did it create? Did it produce a true answer? Or did it create a beautiful illusion that was even more dangerous than the original blur? The truth-making machine. Inside the AI black box. To understand what happened next, we have to look inside the technology that was used. which is known as artificial intelligence, or AI. It is very important not to think of this technology as a magical tool that can see into the past, but instead, it is much more accurate to describe it as a very intelligent student who is extremely good at guessing and copying. This smart computer program has absolutely no real knowledge of history. It has never seen the actual Endurance ship, and it does not understand what it was like to live in the year 1915. The way that the AI learned how to repair old photographs was by studying a massive collection of millions of other pictures that were stored in its computer memory. And this collection is called its training data. The single most important fact to understand about this process is that the vast majority of the pictures in the AI's training data are completely modern photographs. These are pictures taken with new, high-quality cameras that are perfectly sharp, colorful, and full of detail. So, when the computer looked at a blurry spot in the old Endurance photograph that was supposed to be a human face, it did not actually see the real person's missing eyes or mouth. Instead, the AI program searched through its huge memory of modern faces and made a very logical guess. And it then created a new, sharp face based on the average features it had learned from looking at thousands of people who live in our world today. This means the entire process was not really a true restoration of what was lost. It was more like a quiet invasion, where the styles and the logic of the 21st century were being used to fill in the empty, unknown parts of the past. So, now that we understand this deeply flawed and risky method, we are left with a critical question. What did the final picture, which was created by this sophisticated guessing game, actually look like? And why was it so powerful and convincing that it managed to fool the entire world at first? The perfect illusion. When the lie was welcomed as truth. The moment that the brand new, artificially enhanced version of the Endurance photograph was finally released and shared with the public. The reaction was immediate and completely overwhelming. The image spread across the internet with unbelievable speed, appearing on news websites, history forums, and social media pages all around the globe, and millions of people were absolutely stunned by what they were seeing. For the very first time in more than 100 years, the men of the Endurance were no longer just blurry, ghost-like shapes standing in the snow, but they had become real people with real faces. People could now see the lines of worry on their foreheads, the texture of their thick wool coats, and the tired, determined expressions in their eyes, which made the entire historical event feel much more personal and emotional than ever before. This new, crystal-clear image was praised everywhere as a true miracle of modern technology, and people celebrated it as the ultimate way to bring history back to life for a new generation. Teachers began to download it to show their students. Documentary filmmakers started asking for permission to use it in their movies. And some museums even considered replacing their old, faded prints with this vibrant and seemingly perfect version. The key thing that happened during this time was that the new AI image was not just seen as a better or clearer copy of the original. Instead, the public quickly accepted it as being the new, true version of that historical moment. The quick, beautiful, and easy-to-understand picture created by the computer had successfully become more powerful and more believable in people's minds than the complicated, blurry, but honest photograph that had existed for a century, with the entire world now completely convinced that they were finally seeing the real, unedited truth. A very important question hangs in the air. Who would be the first person to stand up and challenge this perfect picture? And what tiny, almost invisible detail did they notice that millions of other people had completely missed? The first crack, the zipper and the collapse of belief. Just a few days after the entire world had celebrated the new, perfect photograph, a single message posted online by a historian who had spent her whole life studying Antarctic expeditions started a chain reaction that would bring the entire illusion crashing down. This expert pointed out a very small but extremely important detail in the enhanced image that everyone else had overlooked. In the picture, one of the men standing on the far right side of the group was now clearly wearing a heavy coat that had a modern-looking zipper running down the front of it. The problem with this detail is that while zippers did exist in a very simple form in 1915, they were extremely rare and were absolutely not used on the kind of heavy, practical clothing that was made for surviving in the coldest place on Earth. This single, impossible detail acted like a key that unlocked a much bigger problem. Once this first crack in the perfect image appeared, other experts began to look at the picture much more closely, and they quickly started finding dozens of other things that were completely wrong. For example, they noticed that the patterns on the wool fabric of the men's coats were styles that were not invented until many decades later. And even the shadows cast by the men on the ice did not make sense, as some shadows seemed to fall in different directions, as if there were two suns in the sky. The most important part of this discovery was not just the long list of all the individual mistakes that the computer had made. The real shocking realization for the experts was the much bigger idea behind it. If I could so confidently and so perfectly create a small detail like a zipper that never existed, then how many other parts of this supposedly true image were also complete fictions created by the machine? This moment was the turning point where everyone finally understood that the problem was not just a few small errors, but that the entire method used by the computer was fundamentally dishonest and unreliable. The dangerous precedent, when the shortcut becomes the main road. Now, we finally arrive at the very heart of the mystery and can fully understand the real reason for the experts' deep and lasting regret. Their great worry was not actually about the list of physical mistakes that the computer had made, like the wrong zipper or the impossible shadows. The true problem was something much bigger and far more dangerous, a problem that had to do with the entire process of how we study and understand the past. For centuries, the work of historians has been built on a foundation of very strict and honest rules, where every single fact must be checked and supported by real evidence. By celebrating the new, perfect-looking AI photograph, even for a short time, the experts realized that they had accidentally sent a very powerful and dangerous message to the whole world. The message that people received was that you no longer need to do the slow, difficult, and sometimes frustrating work of real historical research anymore. The AI seemed to prove that instead of spending many years in a library or a museum carefully studying old documents and artifacts, you could now simply use a computer program to get a perfect and complete answer in just a few minutes. This created what is called a dangerous precedent. A precedent is an action or a decision that happens for the first time, and it then acts as an example or a rule that people will follow in the future. The experts were horrified because they understood that they had accidentally created a new, accepted way for people to treat history. A way where a quick and beautiful result created by a computer's guess was now seen as being more valuable than the slow and careful process of finding the actual truth. The danger of this precedent is that it does not just apply to this one photograph of the Endurance. It could now be used to change any part of history, from analyzing ancient written texts to recreating important historical events, which could lead to a future where we can no longer tell the difference between real history and a perfectly generated lie. The battle for truth, the effort to recall a fake history. After the experts fully realized the enormous and dangerous mistake they had made, they immediately took action to try and correct the problem as best they could. The first thing they did was to completely remove the new, artificially enhanced photograph from every single official website and online archive that they had control over. They then published long, detailed public statements where they apologized for the confusion they had caused, and they carefully explained to everyone exactly what had gone wrong with the computer's process. But very quickly, they began to understand that their efforts to fix this situation were almost completely useless. because the damage had already been done, and it was now far too late to undo it. The reason for this is that the fake, perfect-looking photograph had already been seen by millions and millions of people all around the world. In the few days that it was online, it had been downloaded, saved, and shared an uncountable number of times. It was now being used in school projects. It was appearing in online videos, and it was saved on personal computers everywhere. The false image had escaped the control of the experts and had started a life of its own on the internet. And once something like that happens, it is absolutely impossible to erase it completely. This created a brand new and very difficult problem for the historians. The fake photograph had essentially become a permanent digital ghost, a new version of history that would now exist forever alongside the real, blurry one. The experts now understood that their job had completely changed. Their battle was no longer just about discovering the truth of the past, but it was now a constant, never-ending fight to educate the public and to convince people that the beautiful, sharp image they had seen and loved was actually a lie. They had accidentally released a false history into the world, and they now faced the impossible task of trying to contain it. Returning to the flawed truth, the lesson from the gray areas. And so, at the end of this entire story, we are left to look once more at the original, 100-year-old photograph of the Endurance, which is still blurry, still faded, and still incomplete. But now, after everything we have learned, we are able to see this old, faded picture with completely new eyes, and we can finally understand its true and most important value. The blurriness and the missing details are no longer seen as flaws or imperfections that need to be fixed, because we now know that they are actually the most honest parts of the entire story. Instead, that blur has now become a powerful symbol of something incredibly important. It has become a symbol of honesty. The photograph is being honest with us because it is openly showing us the limits of what we can know for certain about the past. It serves as a permanent and powerful reminder that history will always have some empty spaces and some unanswered questions, and that the job of a true historian is to respect those empty spaces, not to quickly fill them up with beautiful and convenient guesses, just because modern technology allows us to do so. This brings us to the final, most important lesson from this entire event, and the true reason for the experts' great regret. For a short time, they forgot the most important rule of their own work, which is that the slow, careful, and honest process of searching for the truth is always more valuable than having a final answer that looks perfect on the surface. They learned, and we have learned with them, that a flawed and incomplete truth will always be better and more valuable than a beautiful and perfect lie.